Hi, I'm happy to give the 7 lecture. So we'll have one more next week, and this will be the end of this series. So today we are going to talk about chapter 18 and 19. Chapter 18 talks about what is a narrative for machine, and chapter 19 gives a general mechanism to generate several universal point of view in narrative. So let's start. So you can see in the following video two possible future. One is that isotopic in the left, and in the right, it's like one that we will become a machine as well. And what I claim is that either we will learn how to live together and enjoy the best in both worlds, us and machine, or maybe machine will replace us. And in fact, if we look on a Turing test, the imitation games, if you saw the movie, and the Ex Machina, if you saw the other movie, so we all, there are several scenarios on what will happen between the relationship between human and machine. And I guess that we all care about, or think about the future. If we look on this imitation game, a Turing test, I guess we all know it, but I will repeat it roughly, is that there is Turing try to define what is when machine will be intelligent, and he divides it by three parties experiment. So there is a room, and in the room there is either a machine or a human, and the human try, and there is a test. So there is a tester and a guy that take the test, or a machine that take the test. And that the guy that test try to ask the machine or human several questions, and in the end, he has to decide if the machine is intelligent, if what is inside is a machine or a human. And then there is a guy that check if his decision is correct or not. So we have three-party scenario, and we will say that the machine is intelligent if we will not be able to distinguish between human and machine. And I think that this approach is, in some sense, it's bring us to dystopia, not utopia. Because once the machine succeeded to imitate human, so now the question is why humans are necessary, or can they are going to replace us also? And we have several questions like that, or several ideas. I think a better approach is to assume that humans and machines are different. They have different properties, and they have different notion of intelligence. And when they work together, they can enhance each other. And if they work, say, once against each other, of course, then we will lose, or everyone lose, right? There are things which humans are good, and there are things where machines are good. So we will try to cooperate with machines instead of trying to imitate humans. So since we are all computer science or mathematicians, we know what machines do good. They are good in counting. 1, 2, 3, right? They can count very boring stuff. They are good in doing repetition, and so on. We, on the other hand, at least according to current technology, are better in understanding concept, asking questions, interpreted answers, and so on. So it's better to enjoy both strengths and weaknesses of each party, and cooperate in order to enrich our life and not trying to replace each other. Okay, so now I want to talk about what is the story. So I will play with those notions a little bit, and then I will try to give you the definition. And of course, the definition is not, I hope it's the correct one. It's the best I could do. Maybe some other people will come with a better definition. My idea is to follow Turing's footsteps and try to change a little bit Turing test for intelligence to define what is a narrative for machine. And I guess this is really the right language to define the narrative, because we really need all the power that we have, and the most powerful tools that we have are, of course, Turing machine. So let's consider the following pictures. So here we see two guys drilling in the ice. And using drilling in the ice, we know the temperature of Earth for billions of years. Actually, I think we know from the moment life started, or maybe a little bit before, or a little bit after, I don't know. So around 4 billion years, we know exactly the composition of the atmosphere. And how do we know it? Basically, we know it because when we drill into the ice, there are some bubbles of atmosphere in the ice. And if we take it layer by layer, we can evaluate time. And so you can imagine that actually the atmosphere, position of the atmosphere in that on Earth is written in the ice, right? How could scientists come up and compute the what was the composition of the atmosphere in let's say 1 billion or 1.2 billion years ago? Well, they discover layer after layer. They approach to the right layer and they look on the amount of CO2, the amount of of H by the amount of oxidant, the amount of any gas in the atmosphere, and then they could say, we know that the atmosphere was like that. So now we have a story, right? And scientists come and tell us a story about the composition of the atmosphere from today, and we go back in time to the beginning of records on the ice sheet in Antarctica. So this is a story, and the question is, who wrote this story? Of course, we can imagine that the scientists wrote the story, but how come they knew the atmosphere composition, right? It was written in the ice. So now we come to, you could be very conservative and say only people can write. You can see, you can be, so now we can be more progressive in our assumption and assume that nature actually wrote the narrative and we only interpreted it. You could, there are many similar examples where nature writes us a story. For instance, the background radiation. In some sense, it's the history of the universe written on the sky or on the, when we write, using electromagnetic radiation or receiver, we can interpret what the universe tells us. So either you decide that only human can write and written and a narrative is only by text and books, or you can say that it's more complicated. There is a nature or others entities can write and other entities can read. I tend to interpret it in the broadest sense. So for me, nature can write. Even nature can read in some sense. And of course, I believe that machine will one day write novels. They already write maybe bad novels, but maybe one day they will get a Nobel Prize. And then it's not clear that this is only human that can write, and it's not clear that only human can read. Another thing which is a little bit interesting is that if you look on the definition of Turing machine, by the definition, Turing machine can read and write. And moreover, if you look on the how we write and read, we always need a machine to help us writing, and we sometimes also need a machine that helps us reading, right? Nowadays, we have Kindles and computers, and if the machine is not working, we cannot read. So there is a very close relationship between machine and the process of reading and writing. In fact, I believe that machines are necessary for even for humans to write. Right? We all write only, we write using a computer, right? We no longer type. But even when we type, we use a machine to help us writing. Even in the ancient day, when we use to write on a clay, it's still some kind of machine. So the relationship between a machine and reading and writing is very complicated. It's very, very intimate. They are there. The machines are there. So for me, nature can write and maybe read. Okay, so now I want to give you two examples of what is the shortest stories. And again, this is very, very, very crucial for us to understand what are a narrative, because this is help us grasp what we need to define. So there are two stories. Both of them are roughly the same size, right? The first one is for sales, baby shoes, never worn. This was written by Hemingway. And the other is when he wake up, the dinosaur was still there, and this is written by Augusto Montestieri. Let me give you a few words. Every one of those stories has a background, and it will be necessary for us to understand why those are stories and why they are very short. So it's easy to see that they are very short, right? No problem. It's very difficult to come with a very short story. So the first story, when we write it, we ask ourselves several questions, right? Why those shoes was never worn? Why someone going to sell baby shoes that were never worn, but it's not a shop, right? It's a person that sell it in there. Did he get two shoes, the same that he doesn't need one, or did the baby die? We don't know why. So we have several interpretations, several ways to interpret those two sentences or one sentence. And in fact, this story was written around the 20s of the 20th centuries, so 1920s or something like that. And near that time, there was a big scandal about a baby girl. She was a murderer, and basically, I think maybe they found the body. I don't know really, but somehow it was the baby were kidnapped and then murderer. Maybe they wanted money for releasing the baby, and I think maybe the mother or the father published this ad in the newspaper. And that was in the background. So those two stories tell the story of a murder of a baby. Of course, you could interpret it in different ways. But there is the moral of the story is that we have at least two interpretations. And we don't know why. And this is crucial. The other short story is when he wake up, the dinosaur was still there. it's a metaphor about the Brazilian dictatorship. So the dinosaurs are the general, and there was a censor, so you cannot write the generals were still there. Is it a nightmare? Is he afraid? Is the dinosaur going to eat him? We don't know. Again, we can interpret it in many ways. And this is again crucial. So if we conclude the moral of those two short stories, we have the author, doesn't have to be human, could be a machine, could be nature. We have someone that read the narrative, us, machine, nature, we don't know. The guy that read the narrative need to interpret it. And the interpretation need to make sense in some sense. So we need a judge. So we have again three entities, in the same as in Turing test. The guy that writes the story, again, you have to understand that the guy that writes the story, in some sense, he do all those three things by himself, right? He writes and then read and then judge if it makes sense or not. That at least a good author is supposed to do that, right? Questions?
Oh, no.
Okay. So here is another thing to think a little bit about it, and this is really main criticism about all those guys for machine learning or AIs that tend to say that people do better things, that machine do better than human, and it's not clear what is the difference between human and machine. It's really, in some sense, we already live in hybrid society. So this is the following scenario, which I believe capture many of the famous results that we hear about AIs. So we write some programs. Let me be the evil AI, the evil computer scientist. I write some programs that generate 1 million songs. Then I am asking 10 million people, it's not a lot, to each one of them to listen to 10 randomly sampling songs out of those 1 million. And they need to rank them, so I take the best, so I throw up all the garbage, and I remain with, let's say, maybe 10,000 songs, and I repeat. In the end of the process, I will have a single song. The question, who wrote the song? Is the machine wrote the songs, or did the people actually wrote the songs? Because the quality, we all can write very bad songs. This is for sure we can do it. So when I give you the end of the results, usually people from AI give you one picture, or one song, so one beautiful picture. They don't say how many pictures the program throw out, and they don't say who did the quality control. And of course, it's just a matter of quantities, right? If we wait enough, then even a silly random process will write Shakespeare, right? Of course, we'll have to wait a lot. So when you say that machines do better, you need to be very careful. It's not clear. If you just give me one instance, then I don't know if you tell me the truth or not. I can give you another example when you need really be very, very careful when you claim that machines doing better job than human. Here is another example, real example. I think it was in a IEEE conference, invited speaker, 3 or 4 years ago, and they claim that a machine can interpret it. There are two kinds of laugh, one which comes from joy and the other comes from embarrassing. And we humans supposed to distinguish between those two, because if someone laugh from joy, is happy, then we are supposed to continue doing what we do. But if he's embarrassed, then we better stop, right? It's not nice to. So I was not in the invited talk, but they show the audience a picture, and they ask, it was an actor, and they asked the audience, is he is he happy or is he frustrating? Is not happy. And most of the scientists said that he was happy. And then they they said, well, the machine said that he's not happy. And they show a movie where he was trying to solve CAPTCHA and he was frustrating because he was not succeeding. So the machine interpreted better than human. This is, of course, totally wrong. It's nonsense. And let me explain why. As I said, the distinguish between laughing and embarrassing is a way to communicate my feeling. I need to tell you, stop, please, I'm not happy. Or I'm telling you, please continue because this is fun for me. So if most of the people thought that this guy should continue because he is happy, then it means that this guy don't speak correctly the human language of sign. It's not mean that the machine he speak very badly the way we move, because the whole purpose of those laughing or signs is to tell us if we are happy or not. So if most people think he's happy and he's not happy, he doesn't know how to speak. In the same way, I'm not speaking great English. So if you don't understand me, it's not because you are not okay, it's because I'm not speaking good English. Right? It's the same way. So machine can never understand better human interaction than human. Maybe the other human don't know how to speak. That's the possibility. Can understand as much as better, equally like or worse. Cannot happen that 100 people think A and the machine say B and A is correct. Because the whole idea is that all of us will know the same thing. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, yes, but I don't completely agree. So, it's
okay, good. Okay. You want to say why you don't agree, Michal?
Well, no, I cannot express it, but yeah, I don't completely actually agree. Yeah. So the point is that well, there are two things actually. So one is actually speaking, and the other one is actually making the understanding. And what you were saying is that actually the guy who is speaking is actually speaking correctly, and then the other guy actually who is understanding.
No, I think actually the other guy didn't speak correctly, or he did it on purpose.
Right, that's what you are
to
saying.
Change he was actor, so I guess he knew how to fool us, right? But in some sense, it's not clear. What I'm saying is that in the case of body language, the whole purpose of the body, some of us don't speak correctly the body language.
Right.
We have problems in that.
But that doesn't mean that like people are better than humans. Sorry,
No, but I think what I'm saying is that if all humans think A, if most of people think A, then that's the right interpretation. A, because this is most human. This is by definition the right interpretation. Because this is a language of body movement, right? That's what I'm saying. It's the language is defining by most people. That's the definition.
Well, but then that's kind of like tautology, you know. So then you cannot actually be.
Yeah, I agree that this is tautology, but you cannot say that machine understands, or at least it's very difficult because the language is not well defined. So how can you claim? And the purpose of the language is that most people will understand what you try to say.
Oh, but here actually you should look at it. So the machine actually understood what he was saying actually better than most people. So actually what that means is that he was actually giving out clues to his real situation because the machine actually read it there. People did not, but he was actually making the right clues, but these 100 people didn't read it. So indeed, they didn't understand the language, the people.
No, but I think that the language is by definition composed in such a way that human will be able to understand. So in some sense, the majority of humans, so we have two ways to interpret the result. Either is that the human didn't understand, or that this guy don't know how to speak. What is the purpose of the language?
Well, I think
people will understand.
Right, but this is actually a language which actually predates like humans, like our culture. So this language is actually, you know, like we are born with this language, and we like consciously don't understand it, but the computer actually gained understanding of the language. So
I don't think so. I think the definition of it's the purpose of the body language is to communicate between two people. So if majority of people don't understand, it means that you don't know how to speak.
well, maybe actually the people are spoiled. So maybe actually the people are actually very misled by their education.
That's I'm not talking about babies. I'm talking about grown men, right?
Say it again.
I'm not talking about babies.
No, exactly. That's the problem. So exactly that. Maybe like babies would understand the language correctly, and they would actually interpret actually correctly the facial expression of the guy. But adult people cannot interpret it because they were actually misled by the culture.
No, but I think the purpose of the language is that we will understand. Most people will understand. That's the purpose. That's why we speak.
Yeah, actually, I don't agree.
Body language.
That's exactly that's why we speak. But it's actually the mimics. Actually, that's not part of our actually artificial language. So there is like artificial language which we speak by now. That's like English, and then there are actually like there is mimics and there are like movements and stuff. And that was done before we made up these languages, and actually machine can read that language, but we cannot.
Well, I don't know, but okay, let's continue because it's really a little bit out of the topics. Okay, great, thanks. So this is a definition of Turing machine. I guess that you all know it and saw it several times, so let me skip it, okay? Good. So now I want to discuss the duality between computer science and literature. So in some sense, computer science and literature are duals. And let me explain why. So when we write programs in computer language, we hope that our program has a unique interpretation. Otherwise, the computer will not know what to do. So usually when we have a computer language, we have many, many stories. Each story is a different program, if you want. And each one of those stories has a single interpretation. In literature, this is the dual. We have a single story, and we want to have as many as possible interpretation. So it's exactly the dual, right? So this is one thing. Another thing is that in literature, we have many, there are several, not many, but several universal interpretation algorithms in some sense. You can read or see a movie and say, oh, let's analyze it according to gender theory. So what is the tension between the sexes and so on and so on. And you can interpret it using Marxism or capitalism or any, or you can ask what is the psychology state of each character. So any way of universal interpretation is basically taking any book or narrative and giving a single interpretation, which is again some kind of algorithm to analyzing literature. So this is the dual in literature. And of course, if you learn literature when you were in high school, or I don't know, maybe later, when you have interpretation, you need to prove that in some sense it makes sense. You cannot make any interpretation. It has to relate it to the story. It has to be correct. So we need some kind of judge if we have interpretation. And okay. So now I think we can define what is a narrative for machine. So it's three machines. So we have the machine that writes the narrative, the machine that reads the narrative and interpreted it, and the judge that decide if the interpretation of the machine makes sense or not with respect to the narrative. And of course, the judge, any of those three tuples could be machine or humans. It doesn't have to be a machine, doesn't have to be humans. Yeah, even in the Turing test, you can change roles, right? Sometimes we do CAPTCHA and then the machine try to understand if we are humans or machine, right? So the role of the could be reversed, or could be all of the machine, could be all of them humans. Question about that? Okay. Now, I want to say a few words about the relationship between the machine that writes and the machine that reads. And I'm talking about great stories, not about, you know, what we are usually write or even emails. So what are usually, if we look on a great literature like Oedipus or like Odyssey, Ulysses, it's a mental map of a process that we are going, that we could go through life. For example, if we look on Odysseus, this is about a guy, a very smart guy, that is stuck at some distance place and he wants to go home. And he travel and he has an adventure, and many people or staff try to prevent him from reaching home. And the nice thing is that if you, at some point in your life, you try to reach home, and home doesn't have to be home to the place you grow up. It was maybe the place when you study your PhD. Maybe it's a place, I don't know. Maybe it's your old love or something. When you want to go home, you basically will you will meet all those fictional characters that appears in Ulysses, in Odysseus. You will meet a Cyclop, and this guy will not think that you are human. He will not willing to negotiate with you. You will meet a Calypso, and she will offer you entire stay. It will be better. It's much better, and so on and so on. So if you really understand that you are going to travel home, and you were far away from home for long years, then it tells you what you are going to meet. And any details that appears in the book, you will meet it. So it has to be, in some sense, universal. It should allow you to map the stuff that you meet to the object or the characters in the narrative, but it should be minimal in such a way that it will not put too many details, because once you put too many details, you cannot map it correctly to your experience. So in some sense, again, we see duality. You need to maintain the maximal interpretation of the phenomena that you discuss with minimal details that will allow you still to identify the thing that you are going to meet. It's the minimax relationship. You want to capture as much as possible interpretation with a few as possible details, so that you increase the space of interpretation as much as possible. Okay? Question? Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about what is a little bit different about narrative and drama, or drama narrative. So the difference is that in drama, the story is given in a sequence. So instead of having 3 machines, we can have a sequence of machines. So the story is written slowly. You read the story one by one, so you could interpret part of it. So it's basically you are allowed to put some kind of sequence of machine instead of a single one. But this is of course, any sequence of machine is also a machine, a single machine. So that's it.
You mean like
okay.
Just a question. So you mean like every one of the Turing machines is like one speaker, or what do you mean actually?
So basically, what I'm saying, and at least that's what I was thinking, is that you can imagine that where is it? You can imagine that you read line by line, and now you could imagine that you interpretate all the next line using all what you interpreted previously, and you add the new interpretation for the next line. So the input of MR is basically all what you are seeing up to now plus MR -1 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but yeah.
Thanks.
Just to allow you to do some kind of online interpretation and not in because when you see a movie, sometimes you don't know the story, and then you try to guess and stuff like that. And okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about chapter 19. This is talking about what is the point of view. And again, I'm now not going to discuss the general definition of narrative. I'm just going to use this evolving social network or weighted evolving social network and see what is a point of view. So as always in mathematics, when we have some kind of structure, we have also a substructure, right? Like in group theory, you have groups and then you have subgroups or in linear, in vector space, you have sub-vector space. So a sub-story is a subsequence. So you can imagine that in this chapter, I use a sequence instead of function, but we'll discuss function as well. It's the same. So sub-story is just subsequence of the, if you imagine that a story is a function or sequence that go from the integer to the complex to matrices or graphs, if you want, complex object that describe relationship between pairs, then a substory is a sequence of, subsequence of that sequence. And if you want to do it with continuous function, then how you do that? This is a question you need to try to answer. It's not so complicated, I think. What is the equivalence of taking a subsequence of a sequence in function?
Composition of functions?
Exactly, you compose the function. You can compose it before time or after. So you can compose it by changing the time. So inside the function, and you can compose it outside if you want to shrink the space, for instance. It's exactly composition. And in fact, this is exactly the definition in group theory, right? You have, let's say, normal group is G minus, it's N equal to G minus 1 times N times G, right? It's for any G or something like that. Right? It's the same thing. It's really the composition from the image and the domain. So you compose it 2 times. So now we can define the general, I will give 3 definitions of general point of view. And what we do is basically we start with some set of edges. So we call it SE, set of edges. And we look on all the time that edges from this set of edges appear. So we start with a link string. So each time there is a single link string that appears. And now you check if this link string appeared in SE or not. So any subgraph defines a subset, a substory. Right? It's the substory of those edges. It's when those edges talk to each other, or those characters talk to each other. So this defines the evolving social net. This defines the sublink string, and now you can do integration, and you get substories. Okay. Questions? So now we have 3 interesting point of view, which are universal and really fun to see and analyze. The first one is, of course, a dialogue point of view. So you want to see what Romeo say to Juliet, or what Juliet say to Romeo, what both of them say to each other. So this is 3 kinds of evolving, 3 kinds of dialogue point of view, because we can have 3 kinds of edges for a pair, right? We can have the direct edges from I to J, the direct edges from J to I, and the edge that contain both of them. So we have 3 kinds of dialogue point of view, and here is an example, beautiful example from Godfather. Oops, sorry. Trying to see what the slide. So okay. So this is the dialogue between Michael and his father. So this is what Michael said to his father. This is A. B is what is Don Corleone said to Michael, and C is what they say to each other. So this is a direct. A is direct. B is the other direction. And B is both direction. And you can see that C has twice as many edges as A and B, which makes sense. So now we can do the M diagram, and those two clocks, the one is the event clocks. Event is when an edge arrives, and the weighted clock, when it's counting just the amount of words that was spoken up to that point. And you can look on the extreme point, and this will be the interesting event in these dialogues point of view. And if you look, what is important to Michael when he speaks to his father, the first thing is he tried to, this is before he was, his father was trying to being assassinated. He tells his father, I'm going to school. I don't want to be part of the family. And then the second point, which is this point, is when Michael and Don Corleone has the last conversation in the movie, and Don Corleone said to him, you can see it here, I didn't want you to be part of the family. I want you to be a senator, a president. He has big dreams for his child. And Michael said, don't worry, I choose it. It's not you. I believe that this is my choice. So this is what is important to Michael when he's talking to his father. If we look the other direction, is what important to Don. So he doesn't like he wants him to be, he said, I didn't want you to be in the family. And then the second thing, he just give the torch to Michael, and he said, my son is the head of the family. If you have his permission, it's a dialogue between his old friends, the guys that do his bidding. They want to split from the family, and he tells them, don't ask me, you should ask Michael, he's the boss. And now if you look on what is important in the dialogue, so then this is when Michael read that his father is assassinated and he doesn't know if he's alive or dead. This is the point. Up to that point, he still had a dream not to be part of the family. And at that point, he really understands that he has no choice. He has to be part of the family. There is a war and he has to be part of it. And if you look on and this is the same thing, right? My son is the head of the family. So that's what is important in this dialogue point of view, 3 kinds of dialogue point of view, and you can see that it really makes sense in some sense, right? That's what is important for each of them. And I think this is really great because it was not meant to really analyze. You see, there are very, very few conversation lines between each of them. It's like 15 or 20, 40. It's not a lot. It still capture the relationship very well. Second point of view, which is natural, is just the egocentric. You look on all the people that you talk, and they talk to you. It's the ego point of view. And you take all the edges that connect you to other characters. Again, this is in some sense graphic point of view. You start with a set of edges. In this case, you start with a node. You compute all the edges that the star that go out of it in the AB graph, and then you compute the point of view. And again, we can compute what is important if we do the egocentric of Michael, and then we have 3 because we can take the direction out of Michael into Michael and all of them together. And again, if you look what is important to Michael, so if you aggregate all the communication, here it's just, he's basically, he discovered that his father lying in the hospital without any guards. So basically someone manage the situation in such a way that someone will kill him, right? It is not God. It means that the police waiting for the killer, or clean the road for the killer. So Michael say to the nurse, please stand here. Wait a minute. I need to call the family, right? That's what he said. And this is the line when he say to the Connie husband, good, leave now. There is a car waiting to take you to the airport. But in fact, he is going to be assassin in the car. Again, we are coming to the fact that it's very important for Michael to finish this guy because he is blaming the death of his brother Sonny on the husband of Connie. Or in fact, you see that the competition between Connie and Michael is important to Michael. If you look on what people are telling Michael, you see again, this is the nurse. It's the same, it's very close. You see, it's 40 and 30, 397. This is really the line in the point of view. So those numbers are between, let's say, 1 to 200. You see, this is the sequence in the evolving point of view. This is in the drama. So 400, the nurse saying, you are not supposed to be here. It's late, go away. You're not supposed to. And he, of course, doesn't listen to her. He takes a charge and he says, stand here. We need to move. She helped him. And this is when Michael basically fire Higgins. He said that his father is going to be a consigliere. This is important to Michael. And this is if you do the accumulation, then this is the scenario when he's still saving his father's life. It's very important for him. And then this is the scenario when he becomes the Don. So this is the ergodicity point of view. And you see again that you get an important moment in the life of Michael. And the last point of view that I want to discuss is gossip point of view. So what you look on the subgraph that induced by the neighborhood graph, and you remove all the edges that people talk to you or you talk to them. So it's what people talk between the people that know you. So you look on the neighborhood and you remove the edges that belong to you, either in one direction or in the other. And again, you can see that basically this is when this is the neighborhood of Michael. So this is when basically they are planning to kill the officer. So so Michael suggests a plan to remove this corrupt officer, and the family and the rest of the people think this was a brave act from his side. So they appreciate in some sense. And if you look on the second one, so this is the first one, you look on the second one, then this is Don Corleone said that he have the full support of Michael. He said, I never thought that you are a bad consigliere. You were good, but not for war. And he said that Sonny was not a good. I never thought you were a bad consigliere. I thought Sonny, the other side, was a bad dame. He's not blaming him for the death of Sonny, but he said you have to move now. It's a wartime. I will take care of it. I have the full support of Michael. So that's, again, you see that the gossip on Michael is very positive. They think him as a hero. and his father and the rest of the people think he will do well. So this is a three natural point of view that we will have in any movie or script, right? It's always about characters. It's always about a relationship between two, or what you think or what others think about you. And I think this is really great tools to probe into the narrative. So let's conclude for today. So we defined what is a narrative for machine. We saw the connection between computer science and literature. We saw that in some sense they are dual to each other. So one wants to have a single interpretation to all the stories, and the other wants to have as many interpretations as possible for a single story. We defined what is a point of view. And we gave three universal different point of view, which are really interesting when you analyze a movie or narrative. Next time, it will be the last time. We will talk about the last three chapters, or maybe two, I didn't decide yet. So the last chapter, so the chapter 20 is about how do you find couples or power couples in a narrative. The next chapter is about evil. What are how we perceive evil in movies and in theater, and what does it say, for instance, when we talk about Eichmann, and I really like this chapter. What is the relationship between, for instance, Eichmann and the trial of Eichmann and machines, right? Because he claims in some sense that he was just part of the machine. And the last chapter is dealing with death. Usually when we do social network, we ignore that people died, they live forever. And I think, of course, this is wrong. We all know that at one point we will have to leave this place, and we will try to use the idea that comes from great religious such as Christianity, Judaism, and seculars about life after death, and see how we can model that in evolving social network. And this chapter, I really like it because it's a little bit funny, and it shows you how far away you can go from what I did. It's really, I really scratched the surface of this area of research, because there is so much to do. Basically, say we don't need to have a single number. We can have a vector space or complex number, whatever we want. And then you can put more information. It will be easier to analyze and get different interpretation. So this is the plan for next time. And I really like the last chapter because it's, in some sense, it's funny. I use imaginary numbers to model, life after death. So in some sense, it's funny. That's for next time. So if you have time, please read it. It's nice, I think.
Thank you. So I have a question, if you are open to questions. So here's
Okay.
so you were speaking about like interpretation of stories, and then there are like various interpretations. So how about actually like mass stories? So papers
About what?
about like stories mass, like
This is a great question. Thank you. So this is really, really, really good question. So let me say what I think, actually.
Yeah.
So usually, if we really look on the great theorem, like for me, one of the greatest theorem is maybe Kelly Hamilton, characteristic polynomials of matrices. But any other great theorem, why it's great? Because it's very, very, very useful. This means that you actually have many, many interpretations. So in some sense, if you want to generate a great theorem, you need really to have many interpretations. You could imagine, NP again, you have many interpretation, or PCP, or all the great theorem that you like, whatever you want. What is really characteristic of a great theorem in math is the same as great narrative, many different interpretations. You see, matrix, it's a way to organize numbers. What those numbers say, we don't know. It's sometimes it's apple, sometimes it's orange, sometimes it's, I don't know, graphs. The point is that every matrix has a characteristic polynomial that solves this polynomial, right? And you can compute the eigenvalues and eigenvectors. This is really, really important because you have so many interpretations for what is a matrix. So it's actually the same as literature.
Interesting.
Any great math theorem need to have many different interpretations. So again, in some sense, literature won. But it's the same. It's the same. In some sense, what is the number 2? It's a very simple story. It's 1 + 1. And different numbers are becoming a little bit more complicated or less interesting, but everything is a story in some sense.
I agree. Yeah. Nice.
Thank you for the question. It was great.
Thanks. Thank you.
Other question? So I think this is for today. I really enjoyed today. It's really, you should read, if you have the time to read the chapter. They are really funny, at least part of them. And I hope someone will continue the work from here.
Yeah. Thanks.
Great.